Hey, Toothers, it's just me again. I wanted to try to do a little more talking about the guardrails. Just to back up, right? The Satanic Temple thing, they call theirs tenets, right? So we got the commandments, we've got a Decalogue, we've got tenets. I could call them bumper rails, but that seems weirder. I like guardrails still as a general terminology, but I wanted to put that out there because I did forget, and I probably should mention those with some specificity at some point, but kind of hard to read and drive at the same time. It's why I don't read stop signs, but I recognize them, so I know to stop. Oh, I have another one that's not really a guardrail, but it's something I'm trying to teach my children. When you're looking at lights, even if you're colorblind, even if you're a dog driving a car, you can know whether you are able to proceed through an intersection or not, because as far as the lights go, at least in the U.S., top means stop and low means go, and yellow means don't get caught. I wanted to talk about a couple other guardrails today. I'm trying desperately to avoid the news. It's not working out real well. Looks like Trump's going to sign an executive order to just eliminate the Department of Education, which isn't technically legal. But since the Republicans have been trying to get rid of it since its inception in 1979, so it's as old as I am, it might work. They want to put control back to the states, which has me thinking, incidentally, right? They keep having this obsession with wanting to bring all these decisions out of the federal government and bring it to the states. It kind of makes me think like they're still pissed about the Civil War and states' rights. So I'm beginning to wonder when I'm going to start seeing, government-sponsored slave trades again. That should be entertaining. This place is fucked. And one of the reps in my own state has been complaining about people going to school board meetings, wanting more funding, wanting more money. Teachers wanting more funding, wanting more money. Teachers who pay out of pocket to get school supplies, they want more funding from the state. That's weird, right? It's weird. He further was suggesting that, school numbers are down, but, attendance is down and there's not as many kids going to school or whatever, but they still want more money. Like, yeah, there's enough money to do what they're doing now, jackass. Apparently this guy is a conspiracy theorist, misinformation peddler as well, so that none of this should be surprising to me, but it's still infuriating. Anyway, so what's interesting is that one of the things that I wanted to talk about today, one of my guardrails that I have, which is something that I'm, again, trying to impress upon my children is, for one, always be curious, right? I didn't always appreciate school, but a lot of my disappreciation for school was more that I was getting beat up by people, so that didn't really inspire me to want to go there, but I enjoyed school. I liked learning. I liked knowing things. I still like knowing things. Anybody who's paying attention is aware of that. I find it really important. I find it there's never a point where you know everything, right? There just isn't. It's not possible. We aren't born knowing everything. We do not have knowledge revealed to us. We have to learn. We have to learn everything. I'm sorry, everything is a touch hyperbolic, but anything that requires knowing, we have to learn it, right? We learn to walk. Our bodies are designed to be bipedal and upright, and, we still have to learn to do it. We don't have to learn how to breathe. If you want to do breathing exercises or calming breathing exercises, it is helpful to learn that, but that's not totally what I'm talking about. So learning is always important. I do as like an aside, will suggest that every situation is an opportunity for learning. I'm not proposing that as a separate guardrail, more as a subset or an indented line item under always be curious, because it's important. A couple of the Decalogue items from Russell's list talk about, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but curiosity is important, knowledge is important, learning is important, and frankly, so is skepticism, right? So while you should always be curious, right, part of the way to kind of temper that is another one that I think that I like, which is be skeptical, not contrarian. So it is one thing to just be the opposite, right? To just always say no or always say you're wrong without any kind of real questioning or anything to kind of validate that you're being a dick, because you're just being a dick, right? Being contrarian is not, it's exhausting, but it's not difficult, because you don't have to have a ton of knowledge to just spew nonsense and just say that they're wrong. And not for nothing, but the current president is a really big fan, I think, of being contrarian because it's part of his ego. It's part of the mental illness that is his entire existence. I used to be a militant atheist, and I was just being contrarian. And look, I had legitimate issues at the time, but it wasn't skepticism that was fueling me. It was rage, it was a certain amount of betrayal, a certain amount of, the self-righteousness and the need to be right that I grew up with, the perfectionism. I mean, there were a lot of reasons why I went that direction. I went down that path, that pipeline. I pick fights with believers online, and I do it. I was an amateur troll. I didn't get real professional about it. I'm probably overselling it a little bit, but I wasn't pleased with what my life had been. I wasn't pleased with where I was in my situation because of all of the myths and ignorance that I grew up with. And I mean, look, to be fair, my parents were ignorant in their own right. It wasn't entirely their fault. They're trying to navigate their existence, and the horror show that it was for both of them. I'm not even going to begin to get into what they went through on this platform, but it wasn't nice. It wasn't good. I've told my mother that I forgive them for what they did in the past, but currently they still drive me bonkers. And the reasons are fairly similar if I'm taking a big enough look at it, but also, they've changed a little in some respects, but in others they're still the same people, and they're still just trying. They're hoping that the next world will be better than this one. And for their sake, I hope they're right, but I don't think they are. But by then, it won't matter because they won't know. I took a little bit of a darker turn than I planned, especially when talking about being, knowledgeable. And look, I have been accused of being like a scientific zealot, and I was just fond of it when it happened. And I don't think that I am necessarily. I think it's more about the scientific method and evidence that I'm zealous about, and not necessarily science broadly speaking. So, and I've talked about this before, but the idea of the multiverse, right? The idea of an infinite number of universes. I find that difficult to accept. At best, it's kind of the only explanation that our brains can come up with at this point. But I don't buy it, right? I need some pretty substantial evidence to back that up. I need the kind of evidence that I would need to prove that we were created on the whole, universally, by it being outside of space and time, which obviously cannot be done. I mean, for one thing, it's never been done, right? But also, outside of space and time, in order for that entity to show itself to us, it would then be within space and time. So how do we know that it's actually that entity and not an avatar of that entity, right? Not some kind of physical representation of it, or a liar who's just messing with us, who's also extremely powerful, right? I don't want to discount that. That would be a different situation, but it doesn't prove that such an entity exists, right? It's just like the infinite number of universes. I understand that they say the math proves it out, but without physical evidence, I mean, I think the math, my understanding, which is not great, right? But it feels almost like a circular argument to me, because the math proves the thing. It only proves it because it needs an infinite number of universes to prove the math, right? Like it's not a, it's the, what came first, chicken or the egg? I mean, the egg, but I don't know. I have a hard time explaining that one too, but it bothers me that that's the prevailing, I don't know about prevailing theory, but it's the one that I hear about the most. And, maybe they're correct, but maybe the experimentation that they believe is showing these alternate universes are something else. Maybe that's not exactly correct. And that's the other thing that people, especially people on the right, seem to really, really miss, is that science is not revealed knowledge. We have to experiment. We have to practice. We have to ask questions. We have to challenge it. And, science is more about, these are the answers that we have been left with. These are not the answers that we've been searching for. I mean, if you think about how many times, when you're learning something, how many times you failed before you got anywhere near decent at it. Think about writing as a child, which I guess is becoming less and less a thing. But when you wrote as a child, your handwriting was terrible. Maybe letters were backwards, but as you practiced, you got better at it. It became more legible. And some people have really tremendous handwriting. But unless you're doing it, professionally or for the rest of your days, it's going to stay pretty generic, right? Unless you get into like calligraphy or you're designing like fonts or something like it. Unless you're really driving that particular skill set forward hard, you're going to kind of level off. Doesn't mean you know everything. It means you know enough to get by. Right? We're always seeing improvements in technologies. We're seeing improvements in kind of what we're learning scientifically, right? I mean, we aren't a species that has fully revealed knowledge. We don't all know everything. And the stuff that we know, we have to learn. And you know what? We find that sometimes we are mistaken. And I think the realist, the biggest kind of example of the real pushback and confusion and irritation that I get, maybe not that I get, but that I hear about, right, is evolution. So, all right, a couple of quick things, right? In scientific parlance, the word theory basically means this is effectively settled science, right? It's effectively what is known. And the arguments against evolution, evolutionary theory, etc., are often extremely vapid, very, very weak. And they show a purposeful lack of interest in understanding how we got here. And, look, there are a handful of people that show up in my feed that are of this ilk, and they have the same tired arguments, and they offer similar challenges. If you can prove evolution at all, I'll give you whatever amount of money. All right, well, it's been proven to you. Oh, well, that's not, I don't believe that. Well, then, stop lying. I mean, obviously you're lying, and you're going to keep lying. So maybe don't pretend like you're going to pay somebody money, because that's technically legal, and you can technically be brought to court for stuff like that. It's happened. I don't have the story in front of me. It's been a little bit since I looked at it. I'll try and dig it up to point it out. But it's fairly silly. It's fairly silly stuff, right? The other situation about evolution is there's a real lack, I think, of general understanding that Darwin wasn't necessarily the originator of it, but he was, I don't know, like the bigger voice. There was somebody else that was working on the same path, but ultimately these observations, these calculations, these ideas, they stemmed from like a seed. Like they started as a seed, and then it became a whole forest. We're not talking. So when people they specifically don't know what they're talking about when they refer to it as Darwinian evolution, right? Because it's not Darwinian anymore. Darwin may have been a precursor, but it's like saying all psychology is Freudian. Like that doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. Forward, the light is green, you can go. What Darwin did, started it, right? So, but we've moved beyond that so significantly. I mean, without evolution, without what has been done since that time, we would not know about things like DNA. We would not know about there's certain medicines that require evolutionary biology in order to understand how to make it work. And as far as the age of the earth, because a lot of these people are also young earth creationists, right? So not only did God create the earth, it's only as old as the Bible suggests it is based on, ages of people, how long they lived, and the order that the books are listed currently, right? So again, Methuselah, 969 years. They count that as legitimate historical fact. And they also treat that as, because he's a descendant of somebody and he has descendants, whatever, right? That's the math. So it's 6,000 to 10,000 years or whatever. Maybe it's 6,000 to 8,000 years. I forget. At any rate, it's bollocks, right? So, and one of the arguments, and I've had this discussion with people as well, right? But there's talk about radiocarbon dating. It could be thrown off by what's essentially a percentage, like a margin of error, but they word it as though, they say it's 3,000, it's 10,000 years old, but it's off by like 3,000 years. All right, so then it's 7,000 years. It's still older than what you think the Earth is, right? And that's using your argument. It's not using actual facts. And there's different types of measuring for carbon dating. So it's not just like this one single thing, and then there was a discrepancy in a check, and then, well, what happened with that, right? First of all, is your story legitimate? What were they testing? Were they using the correct dating? Did they figure out that they were doing it wrong? Did they figure out the correct dating method to actually use to make the determination? It's nonsense. When you start talking about something that's 65 million years old, okay, well, what if that's off by like 30,000 years? All right, well, then it's 64,000 and change, or 64 million and change. You're still talking about millions of years old. So it's just people wanting to wallow in whatever maintains their faith, their identity. And, look, I am still prone to being contrarian towards religion. Basically Christianity, more typically evangelical Christianity, and purveyors of the prosperity gospel, because they're all fucking con artists. But I think in general, what I find challenging is the people who are like, I already know what I need to know. I don't need to know anymore. And that flies in the face of the idea of always being curious and being skeptical, not contrarian, because now you're like, I already know enough. I don't have to learn anything different. I don't have to learn anything additional. I don't have to learn anything that might conflict with what I am stubbornly, steadfastly in agreement with, for no reason, really, other than I feel like it's my identity and my deity-driven purpose to be this way. And that, to me, is contrarian, because it's you're waving a finger at learning. You're waving a finger at acquiring knowledge. It's fine to be skeptical about these things. I mean, look, again, there's aspects of scientific thought that I'm not totally on board with. I use the multiverse thing because it's, I think, the simplest one. And I think with all the stuff that's out there about it, and especially with the Marvel movies, it's part of the zeitgeist in many respects where it didn't used to be. So it's easier to use that as a comparison. But, I think I talked about like measuring ketchup flow, which I think was a news story I saw 30 years ago. And I don't know that I see the point to it. I'm not necessarily saying there isn't one, but it's a weird, I would find that a weird conversation to have, to be like, I need a grant to check the viscosity and flow rates of Heinz 57 original ketchup. Why? I mean, are you trying to recreate the blob? Like, what's the point? Like, I understand there's a certain amount of silliness in some of the things that we try to do and figure out, but I'm also not the one doing it. So there may actually be a really good reason for it. And I don't know. I mean, if we already knew everything, then how come, again, I think technology is also the easiest thing to show that we as a people, as a species, keep learning new shit, right? If we knew everything we needed to know at the time the Hebrew scriptures were written, because God revealed all knowledge to us, would I be recording this on a phone right now? God, can you imagine even, 40, 50 years ago telling somebody, hey, listen, in the future, you're going to be able to drive your car and record yourself talking on your phone, and you know what? You'll be able to do it in video too. There was a meme that I can't remember the whole thing, but somebody was charging like their phone with their couch. Like, can you imagine telling somebody in the 80s that they were going to be able to do this? Like, what kind of insanity? And I don't even totally agree with all the technology that we have. And I work at IT. I remember being opposed to getting a smartphone. I was a holdout. Like, why do I need all this crap on my phone? It's a phone. But, I lost to the market. I lost to consumer interest. And here I am. And I briefly went through, I think, what other people may go through in terms of brand loyalty. Like, oh, well, I have to have an iPhone. Yeah, I didn't have that problem with smartphones. I was the guy testing all of them at one of the jobs so that we could know if it would work with our software. Because at the time, that was a new concept, people bringing in their own gear. It was the time of the BlackBerry. BlackBerry dominated the corporate space. Secure devices, keyboards. I miss those keyboards. I don't miss the little nubby thing they would use to kind of scroll around. That thing sucked. That thing was constantly needing to be replaced, but the keyboards were great. So I don't know. I mean, there are things that I like better about the iPhone and things that I like better about the Android. Who cares? I like the Palm Pre, for crying out loud. Does anybody remember the Palm brand? They were the top of the line PDAs at one time. They were the technology, and we moved beyond that. I guess I'm annoyed at, and look, what's irritating about being me, among many things, is that I do have this desire and this still low level need to be correct. And when I'm wrong, I don't get as mad as I used to, because I definitely used to get pissed about it. I'd be mad at myself for not knowing something, but you only know what you know. You know, you got to be skeptical, sure, but you got to be willing. And the skepticism is also for yourself, right? You got to be willing to, my God, that dude on a bike just went through a red light on a crowded street and almost got pegged by a Mack truck. What a jackass. That is amazing, man. Wow. All right. Where was I? Where was I a minute ago? See, I'm also distracted because I'm behind a little box truck for a company called Ferris. So I've got Ferris Bueller running around in my brain in a fake Porsche. I mean, it wasn't a real car. It was a Porsche, right? Was it a Ferrari? Lamborghini. GT California. It was a kid. It wasn't actually a real one. Only 250 were made. Rubs it with a diaper. That was a fun movie. Anyway, and look, I'm also somebody that can get like analysis paralysis. Are you drunk right now? You're at a stop sign. It's your fault for living here. I can also get analysis paralysis. I can also become just overwhelmed with everything that I have to do, and I can't process all of it. Right. So I'm not above the problem of trying to also just make a decision. Right. So the problem of being skeptical or always being curious, at some point you still have to do the thing. I have a friend who's obsessed with asking me questions, and I harass her about it because I feel like she asks irrelevant questions. And look, I'm not going to totally defend her, because there are some questions that are irrelevant that get asked in the context of the discussion we're having, but it continually proves something to me, which is somebody is always going to see it differently than you are. Somebody is always going to lack the same knowledge about the situation that you have. They're not living your life. They haven't lived your life. They don't have the same knowledge you do. They don't see the same knowledge that you have the way you do, which probably goes into other guardrails. So there's other one that I'm thinking about, which, oh no, I've already forgotten it. What? It's probably not about you. That's what it is. It's probably not about you. And to some extent, I got it from the 4 agreements, because there's one, I think the first one is like, don't take anything personal. Maybe not the first one, but it is one of them. And that one I can find real difficult, because again, I got beat up a lot. I got made fun of a lot. I mean, I had a really, when we moved from Illinois to New Hampshire, I had a rough go for a while. It wasn't until I got into high school where I felt like I belonged as a person, but then a lot of the damage or trauma was already done. Some of those traits are still part of me. But one of the things that I have learned, and I continue to learn, I mean, like, I understand it, but I have to keep learning it, or I have to keep understanding it at different levels, involving different people in different situations, because they're not all the same, but it's still a good thing to keep track of, right? It's not always about you, because somebody may just be having a rough day. They may be frustrated with the situation, right? We don't know what is going on with them. And look, that doesn't give anybody the right or the clearance or the okay to be, unnecessarily mean or cruel or violent. But it's not always worth retaliating to their emotional state, because all you're doing is feeding that beast, right? Feeding that demon, that monster, feeding whatever it is that's bothering them. You're making it worse for them. And, I also think that it's helpful, because even if it is about you, even if they are purposely trying to be a dick to you, why? What is it with them that they feel they need to be this cruel to you? So being curious about it and not being as reactive. And look, your initial reaction is probably going to be, eat shit, right? I'm gonna kick this person in the genitals. I want to watch him cry, and I'm gonna walk away, right? I have a couple of people that if I found they died in a fire, I would ask if anybody had marshmallows. Right? I'm not above this. I'm not some monk who is telling you things that he doesn't struggle with. It's part of why I've come up with these, because I need these reminders too. And yeah, there's some question about how do they get there, but the other question is, what am I going to do with that? What am I going to do with this situation, with this person? Right? Am I going to continue to interact with them? Am I going to continue to give them free rent in my head to destroy the property I put him in or whatever, right? Whatever bad renter allegory you want. No, what's the point? Learn the lesson, right? The old adage of forgive and forget. I don't agree with you. You forgive for yourself. You forget for them, right? I don't like that one because you forget and then you repeat the same mistakes. So forgetting is a problem, but try not to dwell on how much it hurts you and what it makes you feel like, how it ruins your day. And look, I'm not saying that that's easy. I mean, I still have issues that I have from growing up. I still have problems that I have from those situations. I'm just going to keep saying the word trauma. It's kind of a buzzword at this point, but it's still true. There are people that have gone through so much worse than I have. And again, I don't want them to forgive the perpetrators of those because those people deserve forgiveness. It's you. You deserve to release some of that emotion for yourself. But forgetting what they did, that's harder. That's harder anyway. But I'm saying I don't think you should do it because you run the risk of them doing something like that again. And I've been around abusive relationships, and it's really you waited until the vehicle was behind you, and then you pulled out. Wow. Oh my God. See, that stuff's amazing to me. I find that incredible. It's not about me. I mean, it's that you almost got hit because you just decided at the last possible second to do the thing when you could have done it sooner. It's just unhelpful. Yeah. So, look, I really just gets a little rambly. I'm trying to, I think part of the issue is that where I think so many things are connected or interconnected or could be interconnected that I end up going from one idea to the next because there's a thread of connectivity in my brain. There's just enough connective tissue that I have to jump to that topic. But at any rate, I think it's important to continuously be open to learning, and you don't have to be book learning, but it can be helpful just to listen to people. Listen to what other people are telling you. They may not always be correct. They may be completely out of their mind, and they may be giving you complete lies because that's what they were told or because it's what they actually believe. And they figured out how to make it consistently, confirmationally biased. They find ways to delude themselves, and then they tell you how true it is. But you have to remember that people are where they are. That's an element that I have to put down somewhere. They're not where you are. They're where they are. And that is important to remember, right? You never know what someone is struggling with. Be nice to people. Do I have that one right? Always be curious. Be skeptical, not contrarian. I mean, there are a couple other ones. Yeah, it's probably not about you. There are a couple other ones that can fit into this. Listen to understand, not to respond, because, I mean, it's part of like the active listening concept, but it's something that I have struggled with, and I still have struggled with it. And I notice my son struggles with that, because I know for a while you want to be part of the conversation, you want to be part of the group, you want to be able to show that you know something, and then you figure out that you actually sound like an idiot or you're completely missing something. So I learned to be quiet a lot from that too, because I didn't want to look completely stupid or insane. But it is important to hear people. And again, the thing that I struggle with a lot is the people that are spewing nonsense, hate, lies. It's hard to have a conversation with that, especially where they're not interested in hearing anything beyond their own rage and insipid ignorance. So it can be difficult to stay focused, to stay on task. Anyway, I think this is good. For now, I'm at like 40 minutes of recording, which means there are probably 30-ish minutes of actual content. So I think that's a pretty good place to stop. And I appreciate the handful of you that are still around. I hope that you're brushing your teeth, because seriously, not having teeth is a lot, less work, but it's so much more difficult to think of yourself as a whole person when you allowed so much of yourself to fall apart. Sometimes it's hard to be like, yeah, I'm okay. Like, I'm not, but I will survive, brush your damn teeth. Have your kids brush their damn teeth. I tell my children to wash their skeleton. I heard that somewhere. I can't remember where it was, but I liked it. So wash your skeletons, people. It's the only part of your skeleton you can clean. You may as well take care of it. And, Yeah, try to be nice.